I come up in a family, in a community where everybody went to jail except me. I'm saying men and women, and so for me, it's taking away people that I know and love my whole life, and my work has also been helping people to repair their lives, reconnect to their families. It's been attached to everything that I am, and I want people to have an understanding that when people go to prison, whether it's a mother, father, uncle, aunt, grandmother, grandfather, their families go with them. So though I've never done a day in prison, my whole life has been attached to prison.
Man, you could just hit rewind and then attach his voice like AI to mine. It's the same exact thing. I'm from a community where everybody in my family been in prison except me, the women included. And my father said something to me the other day. He said, Mike, if I spent just 30 years in prison, I would have come home in time to see my mother still alive. Mass incarceration has affected so many people's lives. And like Tony said, when people go to prison, their families go with them. They're burdened by the enormous prison trip costs and the vending machine costs and the phone bill costs and just the cost of the loss of a family member in their community. So, and I think, as we were talking before, off camera, we were talking about this administration with Biden and as the architect for some of some of these extended prison sentences, he should do something about these extended sentences and let these people out of prison.
Hey, everyone. That's what I'm talking about. That's the energy we need. Thank you guys for joining us for the fourth day of our week-long series, The Impact of Mass Incarceration. If you'd like to learn more about the events that we're going to have this week, just scan the barcode that's on your table with the Impact poster, and you'll be able to know all of the information. The Impact of Mass Incarceration is a call home to victims of the criminal justice system who have been taken from their communities and brought back years later to an unrecognizable place without the proper reentry tools. This series also aims to serve as a voice for those who are currently incarcerated and are deliberately silenced. In 2019, the Vera Institute provided data that more than 10 million arrests are made each year in the United States, with an arrest made every 3 seconds. Within this statistic, fewer than 5% of these are for serious violent crimes. Busways employees strive to inform the public of why criminal justice reform is necessary, as well as provide a platform for those with a criminal record and allies in this fight to end mass incarceration. We also hope to provide victims the proper welcoming back home that they deserve. We decided to highlight mass incarceration and prisoner justice awareness during this week because we discovered that Prisoners Justice Day is a solidarity movement that takes place annually on August 10th. The movement began in Canada in 1974 in support of prisoners' rights and to remember all those who have died of unnatural deaths while incarcerated. It's customary on this day for those who are incarcerated or those who are joining the movement to take a moment of silence or even be silent throughout the entire day in order to acknowledge those who have passed away from unnatural deaths while incarcerated. And while I'm on the topic, if you look on your table, there is a promotion for a book called Death in Custody. It will be coming out September 5th, and it talks about the amount of deaths that get unreported within the carceral system and how we need to do something about it. So if you're interested in that, please talk to me after. I can give y'all more details. This evening, we have speakers, Tony Lewis Jr. and Mike Africa Jr., here to discuss their journey of freeing their fathers from extreme sentences. Before I even go into their bio, we can go ahead and do a round of applause right there. And not only are they going to be talking about this journey, but we get to talk about this while Mike Africa's parents are here today and Tony Lewis's junior father is here today. Absolutely. We also have Ken, who's going to be taking care of us tonight. Don't worry, full dining service will continue being available throughout the program. Just give his attention and he'll be sure to take care of you. Mike Africa Jr. is an activist, writer, speaker, stage performer, and hip hop artist. His story is featured in the HBO Max documentary 40 Years a Prisoner. A scion of Philadelphia's Revolutionary Move organization, Mike was born in a Philadelphia jail cell following a police raid on Move's home, leading to the unjust arrest and sentencing of Mike's parents and 7 others to 100 years in prison. At age 6, from afar, Mike witnessed the smoke in the air as a result of a police bomb that was dropped on Move's headquarters, which ultimately killed his uncle, cousin, and 9 other family members. I believe it's good to take a little moment for that. At 13 years old, when other teenagers were looking for their first job, Mike began his relentless pursuit to free his parents from prison. After over 25 years of struggle, with the help of his family and attorney, Brad Thomson, his parents were released from prison when he was 40 years old. In 2023, Mike announced he had reclaimed the home bomb by the Philadelphia Police Department. I know that's right, which had been owned by great Aunt Louise at the time of the bombing, bringing it back into his family's possession. Congratulations. Today, Mike is focused on a fundraising campaign called Reclaim Osage to pay off the mortgage on the family home. Donations are welcome at MikeAfricaJr.com. And now we have Tony Lewis Jr., who is no stranger to Washington, D.C. He is an author, activist, criminal justice reformer, and reentry expert that has spent his adult life working tirelessly at the intersection of poverty, violence, mass incarceration, and trauma. His 23 years of serving leadership, fostering community-based strategies to help prevent violence and increase public safety has brought much-needed clarity and solution to these complex problems. He has fought to create institutional change for those that require it most, while casting a bright light on their needs, hopes, and dreams. In the process, he has built coalitions and developed meaningful relationships with a wide variety of powerful stakeholders across the city and throughout the country. Mr. Lewis Jr.'s activism and advocacy has led to legislative policy changes regarding children with incarcerated parents, voting rights for incarcerated residents, returning citizens, hiring, housing, social equity, the arts, and gun violence prevention intervention. I'm just going to stop right there and go ahead and give you, because that is beautiful. He has traveled the country lecturing about the collateral damage of mass incarceration and gun violence. He has organized efforts to address food insecurity, displacement, and access to opportunity. He has galvanized thousands across all demographics to take on personal responsibility to improve their circumstances and community. Tony Lewis Jr. has been an example that transformational change is possible and continues no matter the circumstances. His work and advocacy have been featured on CNN, BET, The Breakfast Club, The Washington Post, and many other outlets. We even have space for the editor. Tony Lewis resides in Washington, D.C. with his wife, Jessica, and their daughters, Isabella and Sophie. Now, without further ado, please join me in a round of applause while I accept Tony Lewis and Mike onto the stage with me.
Oh man.
What's up, y'all? What's good?
Welcome.
1 2 1 2.
Yes.
It's bright up here.
How does it feel to be in the right?
Think about, I want everybody in the house to think about your favorite song. The song that when you hear it, all you can think about is how much you love it. And you put it on repeat and you play it while you're cleaning the house and you just listening to this song and you just love this song. That's how I felt listening to this brother's bio.
Yeah, circle moments, and we're going to talk about a lot of full circle moments that has happened between their lives and everything that they have accomplished. I first met Mike Africa Jr. informally at my college, Lycoming College. He came and spoke, and I saw the documentary 40 Years a Prisoner. And I said, I need to have him for the impact of mass incarceration. And I remember speaking with our events manager, and we were like, you know, it'd be interesting if Mike Africa Jr. and Tony Lewis Jr. came together and had a conversation, they don't know each other. That's not going to happen. And then talking to Mike, he actually told us that he knew Tony.
Right,
So while we're on that topic, can you actually tell us how you all came to know each other?
Well, I was scrolling through Instagram, and I saw this face pop up, and he said, Mike Africa Jr. man. He was like just like feeling this emotion because I had just got my father out of prison. Wait, was he out yet, or was he?
No, I just saw.
You saw the documentary. Okay, so I'm watching him, and I'm like, yo, I gotta reach out to him. But this is Tony Lewis Jr., so you don't just be like reaching out to people thinking they're gonna get back to you, right? It's a shot in the dark with some people. So I reached out, and he reached right back. And then we just connected from there and just shared some of our work. And there was a rally that he was having for his father down here. I came down to support, to be a part. I met his family. I had a podcast on Black Love, Oprah Winfrey Network, and then I had him on the podcast to talk about the issues of mass incarceration and the issues with his father. And we just been staying connected since then.
Yeah, can I just say something real quick?
Absolutely.
To that though, watching the documentary for me, and so I'm sitting with my wife, we watching it, and I watched a lot of stuff, on dealing with incarceration, but nothing had ever made me feel seen in the way that Mike did. Just hearing him and how he talked about not only his quest for his parents' freedom, but what the process of growing up with your parents being incarcerated, all that came with it. And I remember looking at my wife and telling Mike, he get it, right? I had to reach out to him because that did something for me. I needed that. You know what I mean? All the ups and downs of my dad's incarceration, all the no's that we got. And seeing that documentary was really a shot in the arm for me. I'm forever grateful, bro. I mean that, man. Seriously, I needed it at that time. And so when I reached out, I would just post it on Instagram, just like I wanted other people to find it if they had not. And for you to reach back to me, it was like, so, and everything else he said, that's how I felt. But it came from that moment that was super special. A lot of people in our position, we find ourselves pouring into other people like all the time, or quote unquote being, I don't like to use the word inspiration, but, being able to be, I think, that for other people. And it's hard sometimes for us to be inspired, but he certainly inspired me.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting about this, we mentioned it a little bit in your bio. You started this form of activism when you were 13 years old. There are a lot of youth who have parents who are incarcerated, and their instinctive reaction is not to try to do something about it to get them back home. It's more so to act out that pain in various ways within schools, within the sky's the limit. So if you could just talk to me why at 13 you decided this is something that I'm going to make my life's work.
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I was born in a family that believed in fighting for what you believe in. My grandmother was that way. My parents are that way. How they say, if you see something, say something. Well, that's how they were. So if they felt that they could do something about a situation, they would try to do something. So for me, just growing up in that, it wasn't even a thing where I thought about like, I think I can do something. It was more like just get in line with the people that are already working on this. And because I'm the son of two of these people, and not only that, my uncle was one of the Move 9 too. And so for me, it was more than just a fight for one or two people. It was more like, this is my life, and I just got to keep on moving. And I don't even know if I really thought about what would happen or how things would go if my parents came home. For me, it was just do what I got to do what I can do. And I think in 2016 is when I started like kind of taking the lead on it. Before I was kind of assimilated in and moving with what other people were doing in their plans. But my father, he called me from prison one day and he was saying, Mike, you gotta step up and basically take, help me with this, help us with this. And he was the one that kind of inspired me to like really take the lead and then kind of take the direction in a way that we decided how it should be, and not like more of a collective thing. And then that led to the doors really opening. So I was born into it, I was raised into it, and then we went all the way through it.
Beautiful. That is beautiful. And Tony, if you could speak to when this work began for you, and how it's been, because like you said, just not too long ago, you were faced with a lot of no's and you turned that no into a yes. So you could just speak through that journey.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, the quest for my dad's freedom started the day he went away, right? In a more broader context. But in 2007, my dad's co-conspirator, his name was Rafe Edmond. BET did a documentary on him called, it was part of a series they ran called American Gangster, right? And so the producers reached out to me trying to reach out to my dad to get him to interview us in some capacity, right? My father never did any of those kind of interviews, so I knew that was a no. At that time, I was working in a reentry program here called Project Empowerment. My career at that point was about 7 years old. I was doing violence intervention, but now I was doing reentry, training men and women that had been formerly incarcerated to enter the workforce. So I was like, Dad, what you think about me asking them to come talk to me about the program? And he was like, nah, because they ain't just going to talk to you about that. I was like, and normally up until that point, I'm 27, right? Anything he say, I'm like, all right, cool. I said, Pop, man, nah, think about it. Let me at least have a conversation and see what they say. And they did. And it was an opportunity for us not to just shed some positive light on him as a father and his role in me becoming who I was at that point, but also on reentry. And I think about, currently with reentry, but in 2007, nobody was talking about it. You know what I mean? And that episode allowed me to have a platform. The following year, they came back and did the same series, American Gangster, or Cornell Jones, who was my dad's mentor, a guy from our block. And so they interviewed me again. This is 2008, and the first time publicly I wore a Free Tony Lewis T-shirt on BET. And so that was my statement. They interviewed me more at that point as like an activist and talking about, like 08, where I'm talking about gentrification. I was talking about everything that I'm like a prophet. No, I'm joking, but I knew unfortunately a lot of what I was talking about did sort of come to fruition. But that was like, I think and then Raleigh had a song called Nike Boots that same year. And in that video, I got a Free Tony Lewis T-shirt. And I think that's when I introduced the Free Tony Lewis movement to the world, if you will. And from that point on, everything that I would do community-wise was veiled in, pushing for his freedom, and not just his freedom though, but the freedom of many people that were unfairly sentenced due to the draconian drug laws created, via the war on drugs. Yeah, so but that 07, 08 period was, I think, the birth of it in a way that where we knew it to be like current day. Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned the war on drugs, because that was going to be another question I was going to ask you both. I had the pleasure of being able to watch your interviews, and you mentioned that, the governor at the time, he's the one who allowed the bomb to be dropped on your family's home, right? And am I mistaken?
The mayor.
The mayor at the time. So, and then Black mayor, exactly. And there was a lot of complicit behavior with law enforcement, with people in governmental positions that allowed this tragedy to happen to both members of your family. You had the mandatory minimums, you had the crime bill. And this is when I was speaking about the full circle moment, because currently our president was a part of one of those laws. So if you guys could just mention how that complicit behavior not influence, but had an impact on what has happened to your family members.
Well, first of all, you have the police, right? And the police are put in place as a buffer to keep people away from the people who create and make these laws and run these systems in this industry, right? And so, like, when my parents were talking about the injustices, I mean, it was you giving the brother time in jail because he didn't go to school. You locking people up because they protested at the zoo, because they don't believe that animals should be locked in cages, because in their belief system, animals being locked in cages is the same as people being locked in cages. And the zoo is a prison for animals, and it's a money-making industry, and so is the circus, and the water is not supposed to be polluted. So it was like they're talking about these issues, and then because of the system losing money as a result of them talking about these issues, and women having babies at home because you actually don't need hospitals unless you need a hospital, but pharmaceuticals and the medical industry, they're all being affected by people understanding that you don't really need these systems or these industries as much as the way that they putting these things out. So, when you're talking about these things and you have the police that are going to reinforce any of these desires of these industries, they will do what they have to do to stop you from exposing these things. Mm-hmm. And, if you say the Black Panther Party, right? The Black Panther Party are out there, they're talking about these issues, and then they're talking about, and we have the right to defend ourselves, and we have the right to arms, and it created a problem because it inspired and gave other people the idea that you can fight against the injustices in the system and you can win. So people started getting assassinated. People started getting locked up. It wasn't because they were actually criminals. It was because they were fighting against something that they saw as unjust, and they were affecting change in the communities that they were living in and abroad. So in the case with my parents, the judge who sentenced them, he said, I don't know if you killed this person or not. I don't know who did it. But you're getting 100 years anyway, because you're MOVE members, right? It had nothing to do with the crime. It had nothing to do with the murder. It had everything to do with them taking a position against a system that they knew was wrong, right? So in some cases, some people, I know that the prisons are filled with people that do commit crime, but they're also filled with people who don't commit crime. So, and the abuse of power that these judges are running around with, that is a real issue. The abuse of power that the police are running around with, they can shoot people and kill people and get qualified immunity and nothing happens to them because they're a police officer. So there's so many issues like this that my parents and other people are talking about when it comes to the carceral state.
Yeah, and in my situation, you look at when our current president was a senator, he was the architect of the 1986 crime bill that established mandatory minimums around drugs, and we know in terms of the war on drugs, starting obviously in the 70s, but in the 80s, where crack cocaine came into effect, and you saw Black and brown men just locked up in droves disproportionately, and they created this 100 to 1 for every 1 gram of powder cocaine. I mean, crack cocaine was the equivalent to 100 grams of powder cocaine, and so you get these elongated sentences. So, in a total disregard for men like my dad, who are coming from abject poverty communities where there wasn't a lot of opportunity. None of that is factored in. And the first time he goes to prison, he gets life without the possibility of parole. The fact that you could even think of a sentence like that, right, in so many ways was just ridiculous. And then you go up to 1994, and they doubled down on that and expanded the prison system, took out a lot of training and educational opportunities in federal prison. And so when you fast forward to now, and you think about the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that's been fell victim to these mandatory minimum sentences, right? It took something from community, probably, in my opinion, the greatest destabilizer to communities and families like the one I come from, right? The fact that redemption has just been taken away, that it put drug dealing as the apex crime, right? And so with that went people's humanity, and I think in many ways went the humanity of anybody associated with them, with a drug dealer, right, or crack, or heroin, or whatever. And then the backdrop of that is that these are same. It was, at this point, we talk about this stuff as somebody like talking about the man or something, right? That our government was sending these drugs into these communities, right? And it's laughable sometimes for me because it's like, whenever we talk about accountability, I hear people, and I'm hearing a lot of rhetoric nowadays, right? That's very akin to the rhetoric that happened in the mid 80s or in the mid 90s when these crime bills came into play, where we keep driving accountability, but we're always, poor Black people are always going to be held accountable. Really for nobody else. Yeah, and I feel I'm honestly afraid currently because I feel us teetering on something else that's going to be completely catastrophic to a generation of poor Black people, not only in this city but in this country, right? And I think, to Mike's point, what we miss also is these laws, these policies that send Black people to prison in droves, right? They also become an economic boom for rural communities, right? Because you're going to build more prisons, you're going to staff more prisons. When we visit those prisons, we have to go to your gas station and spend money in your diner, maybe stay at your little hotel. If my and get a bra, like it creates. And I got a line in my book where I say I've seen whole country and steel country become prison country, right? In so many ways, when industry left the cities, when industry, they didn't get replaced with anything. If you understand what I'm saying, even if you look at the drug trade, it's something that became an industry in some of our communities. You took that away; it got replaced with nothing. So much, but when the coal industry died, steel industry died, it gets replaced, and the prison industry was what it was replaced with. So this cycle, right? Sometimes we see these rural communities, these urban communities as being disconnected, but when you talk about the carceral, super intertwined, and so for our especially here in the District of Columbia, we don't have a local prison system. Everybody do their time in the federal system. District residents have been counted on rural census, since 1997. You know what I'm saying? So I think all of that weighs heavily on not only me, but families like mine, and then like what the future holds for us in this place.
And speaking of that, I just read a quote. It said, "The rich get richer and the poor get prison." And I feel that kind of speaks to what you just said. And we all know this to be true. Governmental actors know this to be true. While we're on the topic of accountability, what would that accountability look like? You called yourself a prophet earlier on. It was true. And so if you see these dangers ahead, it's a two-part question. One part is, how can we hold our legislative members accountable? And B, on a local level, what can we do as a community to ensure that we protect our own, being as though we know that this is a true issue that is alive and well?
I think it's real simple. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So, if the laws that are going to send a Tony Lewis to prison for whatever, right? If those laws are applied to him, and that prison sentence is applied to him, if the police do that, if the Joe Bidens of the world who come back now 30 years later and say, well, actually, I made a mistake, I shouldn't have done that. The Black community, I didn't forget about you. I didn't forget about you. If those laws are going to serve his family the same way, then okay, right? But those people are going to be, they're going to treat you differently if they know that the punishments that they're dishing out to us in the poor communities, in the Black communities, they're going to treat us differently if they know that they're facing the same punishments. And I think that's not unreasonable, right? Because we're people too, you know, and everybody that's in prison ain't a criminal, and everybody that is a criminal or that did commit a crime that caused them to be in prison, they can be reformed, they can be changed, they can learn from the mistakes that they made, and they don't have to take 30 years to do it, right? And so, like, for government to have this harsh punishments for us and not have those same punishments for the people that invent these crimes. And we saw Snowfall, and it showed you the way that the CIA wants to fund their wars. So they bring in all of these drugs in here, and then they bring them to the black community, and then they get us on drugs. They charge us for using the drugs. They charge us for selling the drugs. And now 30, 40 years later, we're still in prison for using the drugs that they brought in here. And the people that brought them in here got rich off of it. And, you know, so if those people that understand this and that make movies about this, they obviously know that this is what's going on. So those people should be facing the same punishment that we're facing. And if they're not, then that's inequality. Also, I think it's important for people to understand just how much of a private business prison is. Prison is a money-making industry. Like Tony was saying, they make so much money off of prison. And because they're making the money, they need someone to drive this thing. And who are they getting? They're getting people that can't afford a lawyer. They're getting people that don't really understand the law. They're getting young people. They're getting people to admit to crimes that they didn't even commit, just because they scared them into thinking that if they don't admit it, they're going to spend more time than they would have spent if they didn't admit it. These are kids, 12, 13, 14-year-old kids going to prison for life for something that they didn't even do. America incarcerates people at such alarming rates. This country got 330 million people in it? The entire continent of Europe has less people, and their 900 million population, they have less people in prison than this country right here. So, you know, the fact that they're making all of this money and they're using our bodies to make this money like they did in slavery, and then for us in the community, what do we have to do about it? Man, we got to fight back. We saw what happened a couple days. So if there's any NBA fans here, you know about Steph Curry. And the most three-pointers in the history of the NBA has been made by Steph Curry, and he's still going. That has to be how many times I watched that video. And I was so proud of us because it was so defensible that it was done in such an integral way. So we're not going to attack, okay, this one lady, she's just trying to break the fight up. As soon as she throws a punch, she's in the water. It's like, this is how we need to behave and protect ourselves, because, and this is not violence. I don't want to hear this is violence. No, that's not violence. Self-defense and violence is two different things. Facts. Two different things. So when you're under attack, it is your right, it is your duty to defend yourself. And that's what they did. Homie threw his hat up in the air. And that's how we need to be in our community. When people come to invade our community and they try to bring drugs in our community, when they try to bring crime, when they try to bring violence, when the police come and they shoot people down in the street like they did Mike Brown, we celebrating the death of Mike Brown. Like, what's going on? People need to take to the streets. They need to go knock on them doors and make those people feel uncomfortable. So you let them know you are not allowed to do this, and we're going to do something about it. And that's how it is. Yeah.
I mean, I would just say that, you know, in terms of on the legislative end, I think one of the things I think is super important, and I want to frame this around Washington, D.C., where not only can returning citizens vote, right, but people that are currently incarcerated can vote. We have to use that human capital to elect people that represent our interests. We can no longer afford to sit on the sidelines, but we also have to have our own candidates, right? We have to have people that can get into these seats that come from our community, right? I think that's super important. And I think we have to build real community where we have, in my opinion, stepped away. But and so many things we're talking about today has contributed to the breakdown of the family. You can't have strong community without strong family, right? And I think, the powers that be, right, understood that. They understand the attack on the family weakens so much, right? So we have to start rebuilding that. And, bringing people together, being on one accord, speaking in one voice, and making demands, right? And using our human capital again around the voting process, the electoral process, to use that as leverage to get the things that we need. I mean, as we come upon the 2024 presidential election, Mike mentioned that President Biden has been on the record to say he got around with mandatory minimum sentencing and mass incarceration. He went on the record the last election and said he got it wrong. And we won. Become president, you're going to get it right. And he's done absolutely nothing. So when you talk about the 2024, Mr. President, you're going to have to do something or else, right? Like that's the kind of thing that we have to hold our politicians accountable. If you promise our community something, our expectation is that you get it done. And if you don't, then we're going to vote in another direction, right? To impact your reality. That's how we have to do that. And I mean, it's going to take, in my opinion, some cycles, right? To do that. In this, I feel like local elections are even more paramount than the presidential election. And so we got to start talking to our people about why it's important to vote and it's why it's important to run. I think putting that in the game would make people address our issues differently. Right, they wouldn't put us on the back burner like they continue to do. And if in terms of what's next for me in the immediate, I vow that moving up to 2024, we're going to continue to amplify the voices of families that are currently disconnected and need to be reunified. The president has the power; he doesn't need congressional buy-in. He doesn't need congressional support. By executive order, he can reunite families, right? People that are in federal prison, languishing away 4 decades, and their debt has been paid. He can reconnect them at the stroke of a pen, and our expectation is that he does that.
Absolutely. And if you all are wondering, because you said it's a multi-million, the prison industry is actually $1.87 billion industry. So if you guys wanted to have a figure, that's how much they're making off of our bodies, and it's a shame. Yeah. And so kind of going backwards, we have a lot of youth with parents who are incarcerated. When your parents were incarcerated, you both were young. And a question that I would like to ask that I feel doesn't really get asked nowadays is, what did you need when you were younger and in that circumstance that you weren't given and you wish that we could? Because each child is different, I understand, but what do you believe that you needed during that time while your parents were incarcerated that you weren't given, or that you were even asked to be able to tell them what you needed?
Are you talking about from the community, or are you talking about from my family?
From your family, from your community, just as what do you feel like you need? That could be a multi-layered answer.
I mean, to be honest with you, I just needed my parents. You know what I mean? Like, I just needed them. Everything else was not important. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I had shoes sometimes, they had holes in them, but I wasn't concerned about shoes or a book bag or school supplies. I was concerned about my parents. When are they coming home? How long am I going to be without them? That's all I was concerned about, really. I mean, I went through things that a lot of people in the inner cities go through, with not always having enough food to eat, not always having. I was growing too, and I ate. My grandfather used to say I got a hole in my stomach, because even though I was a slim guy, I couldn't stop. I couldn't get full. You know what I mean? And I just couldn't get full. It just didn't work. It was like all my food went to my feet. I needed my parents, and But you know what, though? I'll tell you this. As much as I needed my parents, because that's a natural thing, right? And I knew them, and I wanted to be in their presence. They're great people. I tell you what, I don't know. I know a lot of people whose parents are in prison, but I don't know anyone who had the relationship with their parents like I had with mine. My dad.
Talk about it.
My dad has always been my hero.
Yeah, man.
You know what I mean? When we were in the playground and we were playing football, and all the quarterbacks were, I'm Joe Montana, I'm Randall Cunningham, I'm my dad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, did you see? I would tell my friends used to get so mad at me. A lot of their parents were in prison too, right? And they used to say, why are you always talking about your dad? And did you see his trophies? Did you see? And I would bring them in my house. And my dad had like plaques from running 36 miles. And he had baseball. He had trophies. I had trophies from him for boxing, for basketball, for handball, for softball. My dad was an all-around athlete, and then he also had chairman of the board. And I don't know when he slept. So I had all of these trophies, and I would tell my friends, "Did you see what my dad did? Like, screw Joe Montana." And my dad wrote to me all the time, and I would write him letters back, and we talk on the phone all the time. So for me, I just needed that, and that relationship never stopped. There was never a time where I was like, I don't want to talk to my dad. You know what I mean? Like, I disconnected from him. A lot of my friends went through that period where they just didn't want to talk to their father, and I didn't. I didn't. Even when we were like, even if we had like a disagreement about something, I'm still, hey dad, what's up? Hey, we cool, right? Like, what's going on? And my mom too. Like, I kept in touch with my mom. I went to visit her. I remember times when my grandmother, she would say she didn't have the money to take us to see my mom. I remember a couple of times me and my sister got on a bus and rode 2 hours, 3 hours to the prison ourselves to see our mom. Right? So, and my mother is my mother is the most optimistic person you will ever meet. So her sister spent some time in jail too, right? And her sister, she was telling me, she said, your mother's cell looked like home. Your mother's cell looked like home. She made the best out of every situation. And when she talked to me on the phone, I felt that from her. You know what I mean? Like, oh, how did you do in school today? I got a D on my report card. Oh, that's all right. You'll be able to make that up next semester. Like, that was her response. It's just optimistic. So just like I got that from them, even though they were raising me, even though they were in prison, they were raising me from prison. There was never any time where it was like, we not vibing, like we ain't talking, we done. Like I'm, you know what I'm saying? So I just needed them. And there was nothing that no one could have gave me a pair of Jordans to make me like not need them. No one could have given me a stack of money. No one could have given me a trip to somewhere. There was nothing. In fact, you ever hear the TV show Survivor? Yeah. I was going to be a contestant on the TV show Survivor. And the reason I wasn't is because I wanted to wait till they came home first, because I didn't want any prison officials to call me and say, your parents is coming home and I'm not there to pick them up. You know what I'm saying? So that's all I needed was my parents.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I definitely share in the sentiment of, I don't think it would be nothing that, that was the goal. I needed my father, right? But I thought it would have been great. And a lot of my advocacy was framed around my experience. My advocacy for children with incarcerated parents was framed around my experience with having incarcerated parents. So nobody never asked me, was I all right? You know what I'm saying? Nobody said, I'm talking about like in terms of school and things like that. Shortly after my father, went away, my mother started to really battle severe mental illness, right, which she still deals with today, to this day. And so I kind of lost my parents in the way that I had them prior, right, with him going away. And so I know the people at my school, or I know they saw her deteriorating, and nobody never asked again, was I okay? Was she okay? Uh, you know, and so my hope has been to try to get school systems to mind for that, to ask, does your child have an incarcerated parent? And if so, how is the child doing? But also to the caretaker, to the guy, like, how are you doing? Maybe if somebody would ask my mom, how is she handling the stress of him being away, the new responsibilities? And my grandmother would step in, and also nobody never asked her. My grandmother, was approaching retirement, and now you got this boy to raise. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think about I'm blessed. I come from strong people. I also grew up around people that are, I think, equally strong, but wasn't able to withstand these blows in the same way. And I see people in the community that can't withstand the blows, and we don't have infrastructure to support them. So again, just like we talked about when our parents went to prison, we went with them. The family, this the collateral damage that happens, and as a community, we have to build supports around that because, the I think we've become almost it's not being in our lives for whatever reason, whether it's premature death or incarceration, addiction, mental health, or whatever. And our babies, when we were babies, we told you just deal with it, right? Because everybody got a story, everybody dealing with something. And I think that's a flawed approach. People are falling through the cracks that don't have to, right? And so, I wish that it was a system present that would check in, and if whatever the issue would have been, or whatever my issues were, whatever my issues continue to be, right, that it would be supports there. Because when one of the things I've seen in my work is if a crime is committed, right, no matter what the crime is, just say a crime of violence, say a young man shoots another young man. At that point, nobody peels back the onion, nobody tells his story. But in so many cases, his mom or father is incarcerated. You know what I'm saying? Or his dad died, his mother get high, whatever. Like, it's none of this stuff is factored in. Or his mother dealing with mental illness. Like, people was watching me, and I use my situation. We know my father, when he went to prison, it was everywhere. You know what I'm saying? His name is synonymous in this city. Like, people knew who I was. People saw my mom and what she was going through. Like, it was just, and I think at that time it was like people felt like we didn't talk about certain things as much, especially on the mental health end. But going to see my mother at St. Elizabeth, which is our mental health facility, was much more jarring than going to see my dad in prison. And but again, there was no outlet for that. It was nothing for me. And not to mention, we lived in this the 90s in DC, crack capital, murder capital, our neighborhood in the bullseye that, you know what I'm saying? There's nobody that I had to just deal. My father was 3,000 miles away in California. So not only my father incarcerated, but for the first 12, 13 years, he was in Long Park, California. Yeah, but you just got to deal. You just got to shoulder that, right? And so for me, it's been very, very important to try to help our community build a safety net for kids, because more times than not, when you got that on your plate and you got kids with incarcerated parents that got more than what I had on their plate, they ain't got the grandmother and the aunts and the uncles and the big cousins that I had, right? The expectation for them, or like the likelihood of them surviving Philadelphia or DC or New York or Atlanta or Baltimore or wherever else, is very slim for a multitude of reasons. And so I needed that. I needed somebody to check in on me And again, but that's to me a driver for me personally, where I'm trying to help us build not only here locally, but throughout the country. And last thing I say on that, I just want to really raise up We Got Us Now, an organization that I'm a part of. Yeah, We Got Us Now, that focuses in on amplifying the voices of children with incarcerated parents. Shout out to Ebony Underwood, my sister. But We Got Us Now. Yeah, for sure.
And if you need to hear, We Got Us Now.
Yeah.
And speaking of youth, I had brought up your interview with the Breakfast Club because you actually said something that I wanted to talk about more in depth. You said that your father used to always say, you can't tell the youth to put the guns down and not give them anything to pick up. And then you also said that as a child, if you've accepted death and incarceration, will not only be your fate, but your glory. How do you combat that?
Yeah.
And so while we're talking about, kids with parents who are incarcerated or who have all of these tumultuous disadvantages against them, if you have an answer, what do we do if we know that this is a reality for some of our youth?
I feel like the way we combat is going to give us the best chance of combating mass incarceration, gun violence, all that. We have to not fight either of those things. We have to fight poverty, right? We have to. That's the primary driver of a lot of negative activity, right? And we have not forged a real comprehensive war on poverty. Is the direction we have to go in if we want to have a true paradigm shift as it relates to not only what's happening in our communities, but I think we are more now than ever. We're battling a mindset. And I think the stabilization that we need in our communities is only going to come from true attempt at economic justice for Black people in this country.
That's right. And Mike, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think poverty is a really, really big part of it. I think you hit the nail on the head with that, and I think Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. explained it about it, poverty being a real big reason why a lot of these things are happening too. And I also think the educational system is really flawed. I mean, the educational system is not really set up to educate the people so that they can be self-sustaining or self-sufficient or out of poverty. Our educational system in Philly, I mean, they shut down schools and build prisons. They shut down schools and build police stations. They take every resource that the schools have. I mean, they took gym, any extracurricular activity that you had, if it was playing a trumpet, if it was learning how to drive, if it was learning how to sew, cook, all of these things that you can use to take care of yourself or to get a job. They distracted them out of the schools and they didn't replace it with anything. And the same thing about the thing about the gun, what are they going to pick up, right? And so what they replaced it with, Kensington and Allegheny they call it K&A or Zombie Land. If you go to Kensington and Allegheny or just Google it, and it looks like The Walking Dead.
Literally.
People are slumped over, they're hung over, they're drug infested. America's sending all of this money and resources to Ukraine, but right here in Philly, you got Zombie Land and they ain't doing anything about that. They're actually talking about opening centers where people can take drugs instead of setting it up so that people are not addicted to drugs. And so I think the educational component is very important in that because it doesn't just educate you to be book smart, it also educates you to be self-sufficient, take care of yourself, right? I mean, when I was a kid growing up, we learned first grade, Miss Leibowitz was teaching us how to grow pumpkin seeds. We had biodomes before there was a thing called a biodome that we were growing from 2-liter sodas after we drank the soda and made, we grew watermelon plants and pumpkin seeds and whatnot. We also, in that same class, learned how to hatch chickens from eggs. From that same class, we also learned how to take care of a hamster named Harry. From that same class, we had a goldfish. We had 2 turtles. One was Spike and one was Lee. Like, this is what we did in first grade. And all of those activities, all of those programs that we had that were mandatory back then, that people learned to see them as extracurricular. They were mandatory programs that we had to do. And now they don't even do gym. You don't even exercise. There's no emphasis on health and fitness, right? So, the educational system is so bad, and I think if we could shore that up and get that better, then I think that can answer a lot of the questions that people have about these issues that in our community.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so taking us back to what brought you two in the first place, which is the fact that you had the fact that you all were on this journey of freeing your parents. So, no person, it takes a village to raise a child. No person's by themselves. It's all community work. So I wonder what communities or who helped you all along the way to officially achieve this goal. Take us, I see that look on your face. Take us through it. Take us through it. Let us know. Let's give everybody the flowers.
Yeah, I mean, you probably know.
All right, so I ain't saying no names because I might forget somebody. There were so many people that supported me in the journey to free my parents. It was so many people. I mean, at home, my grandmother was the one that she raised me from my grandmother and my aunts. That was my village. In the streets, there were so many thousands of people at different times over the years. And some of those people became, they went from being regular, average people to being senators. And they became council members and, learning the issues on the streets anyway, and being in the streets, marching and protesting about certain issues. They, like Tony was saying, they were filling these seats where they could actually affect some change. Or if they can't affect the change, they know who the person is that can, or they're in the office adjacent to. And we had a lot of support, and then there was so many people who gave us a spot on the radio. There were so many people who gave us a spot on the television, and allowed us to broaden the information about this situation. There are so many names, I don't even know them all. Even if I tried to say them all, I wouldn't know them all. You know what I'm saying? So, but it really did start at home, and that's where we at now.
Yeah, like there's so many people. I mean, just from everybody that the whole DMV, right? And everybody, any person that came through any of the programs I worked with. So again, a lot of the media outlets locally and nationally that allowed me to come on. But I will say, all of my musicians and people in entertainment that pushed out Free Tony Lewis. But my man Pusha T connected me to Brittany Barnett. Brittany K. Barnett, I call her the modern day Harriet Tubman, you know what I'm saying? Freeing individuals that have been sentenced to life without the possibility of parole on a federal level. And he connected us. And that was like the last piece of the puzzle. And so I just wanted to raise her name up though, just because she became our attorney and filed the motion that would eventually free my father. But it's just been our family, our neighborhood, just everybody, and throughout just continuing to support us and pray for us and show up, and again, like we talked about when we opened up, how Mike and I connected. But Mike and I could have shouted out on Instagram and he could have been like, all right, cool, bro. Like, good luck. But for him to attend the rally that we did on Black Lives Matter Plaza, to have me to his home to do the podcast and help to push, a tone, you might need to go. And man, have you ever talked to the judge? I'm going to share this because this was important to me. He called me one day like, hey, you ever go meet with the judge? And his parents' case was a state case. My father's case was a federal case. And I say that because sometimes, on the state level, it's maybe it's easier to like. If my father had a district charge, a DC charge, I felt like my platform and my connections I could have gotten a room with a judge in Superior Court. But the fact that it was a federal judge, it was like a little different. So in my mind, when he gave me that advice, I'm like, man, I can't do that shit. He like, bro, I'm telling you, man. And I actually told him, nah, man, just try. And I was thinking to myself, like, yeah, why not? What the fuck? What we got to do? And that was important. And once I did call, I did not need the judge, but I talked to the clerk. But it was stuff like that. It was like, those were tools that people have come into my life at different points and asked me, or sometimes people would give me suggestions that I was like, bro, you don't think that's not a good idea, or why would you think I haven't done that yet? But the reality is people's always trying to come to lend information that will help me get to my end goal, right? And so that's been very blessed in that. And I'm incredibly grateful for everybody, whatever, a post on Instagram or a like, a comment, a keep going, whatever. Never took none of it for granted. And ultimately, I think, it's clear in the combination of all of those things, TLC is sitting over there, man. So we blessed.
Yeah, the power of community is just phenomenal. And you both brought your books today, and that is another reason why we're here to talk about what led you all to write those books. And you also have done work in providing literacy within communities, within prisons, if I'm not mistaken, right? Right. So you all can speak to that as well, the power of literacy and how it's impacted your work.
So the book that I brought today is called 50 Years on the Move. And it really is like a synopsis of the history of the MOVE organization. And we put that book together just to kind of give people a quick understanding. 50 years, trying to tell the history of MOVE of 50 years, that's a long book. So we wanted to just be able to give people an understanding that they could grasp quickly. There's too many details, too many nuances. There's a movie called Wake Up, and it shows about the whole Branch Davidian. That movie is 10 episodes long. It only talks about like a short period of time, right? But it's 10 episodes long. That would be a 1,000-word book. But just to try to give a synopsis of the organization and the history of it and some of the major events that happened in it. That's what that book is about. And the reason I did it is put it together is because a lot of people really don't, if you heard about MOVE, you don't really understand. Most people don't understand like the different confrontations. They get the confrontation when the bomb was dropped confused with the raid on my parents. And this book kind of illustrates and shows you how it happened in the lead up and the culmination and basically to where we are today. And people read books. But when COVID happened, a lot of things stopped, but people kept writing books and they kept reading books. And I also wanted it to be a thing where we could send to prisons and we could give to colleges. I travel and I do a lot of speaking engagements at universities, and they want to study and they want to learn about and write about. So this was a good thing for us to do, to tell our own story versus allowing somebody else to tell it. And you never know what it's going to be like when somebody else tell you a story. So that's like the most reason behind 50 Years on the Move.
Yeah, and Slug is a memoir that I completed 10 years ago, released 8 years ago. As I was sharing with you earlier, this bookstore was the first bookstore to carry Slug. But it was my attempt to, and I see it as like being the most comprehensive look at mass incarceration. I wanted to show people the real impacts and what happens to a family and a community when people are taken away from it. What's in there, the way it's a story, it's my story, but it's more than my story, it's our story It's a story of a generation, the impact of gun violence and mental health and trauma, a boy's quest and fight to hold on to his parents despite all that he went through. To talk about a father's deposits into his son from prison that helped his son survive some of the roughest terrain there is. This book, I can speak to it being something that's been able to reach people from all demographics, to show the humanity that exists in communities like the one we come from, but also hold a mirror up to America, right? Say, look at yourself, right? Look what you're causing, look what your systems are creating in these communities, but also to empower people that come from communities like mine and know that you can do something about it, right? You can change, the trajectory of not only your own life, but the lives of people around you. Yeah, and the book has been, used in high schools and middle schools and colleges and in juvenile facilities and in state and federal prisons. I've also created a life guide to accompany it for readers from 12 to 21, to really help them sort of experience the impact of like bibliotherapy, if you will. It gives them the opportunity to almost, write their own book. Sometimes, writing, the crafting of the book for me was incredibly helpful and therapeutic. Yeah, so it's been, for me, one of the, aside from my children, the proudest thing. And I really call it Slug, like it's Izzy's twin. I think Izzy was born October 17th, 2013, and I probably finished the last paragraph maybe in like December of 2013. You know what I mean? So yeah, man, we got some new chapters to write, I think. So we might got something else on the way. Yeah.
You heard him? And it's amazing that you said that, because I believe one of the reasons that a lot of people succumb to that feeling of hopelessness when you have a parent who's incarcerated is not seeing that example of someone doing something different, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's beautiful that you all are, for you specifically, putting out this book so that people can see that you are not alone and that there are answers to the, you don't have to accept what's given to you.
Sure.
You have the opportunity to do something about it, from both of you. And so I just want to say thank you guys for coming. It's been amazing speaking with you. Like I said, this is just such a beautiful full circle moment to have you both on this stage at this time. Even going to the fact that both of you are juniors, like I think that is just incredible. And so at this time, we're going to open the floor up for questions. Just raise your hand if you have a question. We only have the mics on the stage, so just if you could use your outdoor voice, that would help us out a lot.
Yeah.
Don't be shy now. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for sharing with us your story. I'm Carmel. I see so much of my own story in both of yours. My dad was sitting right there, did 25 in Jackson in the state of Texas, and I fought for years for his freedom. And I go to a lot of events, hear a lot of talk, and there's a lot that we need our government to do. But as a community, can you make some suggestions as to what we can do as good neighbors to each other to support just impacted families, just impacted children? While we're waiting on the government to get it together, what can we do to advance this cause? Thank you.
Well, first of all, let's celebrate your pop being home. And you for working to make that happen and get that and y'all be together, that is so special and I'm happy for you. I think Tony said local politics is really important, right? In some cases more important than the national level, right? You can walk down the street and knock on your council person's door. And if they want to get elected, help me out. You know what I mean? Like, look, in Philly, the councilmen, they run, or they're the council person for a certain amount of thousands of people in a certain amount of square miles. And they live among the people. They have a house right there next to the other house. And that certain amount of people in that community, they don't necessarily know what they can get that council member to do. But what we do know is the system is controlled by pressure. And a council member wants to get elected. They're going to do whatever they're pressured to do. So if you get your people and your friends and your family and in churches and the synagogues or whatever's going on in the community to understand the importance of an issue that you're raising, and then get your council member to support it, and then take them over to the next community and do the same thing there, and then keep it going. And it don't take a whole lot of people to demand something, as long as you're strong in your demand and your stance, to actually affect change. When we had a district attorney in Philly by the name of Seth Williams. Seth Williams was followed. I think preceding him was, I don't know, some really racist district attorney. Lynn Abraham. They used to call her Madam of Death. Before her was Ed Rendell or somebody. Anyway, all of these people were terrible. And then this wave, because there was so much of these injustices happening and these extreme prison sentences, there was this wave of what they called progressive DAs coming through. And Philly was tired of this Frank Rizzo, Gestapo-style district attorney police system. So they were like, all right, we're going to get one of these progressive DAs. And the district attorneys that were running for office, they didn't get votes. Because the people were so fed up that they started supporting the progressive district attorneys. And on that progressive district attorney, under Larry Krasner, the juvenile lifers that had been sentenced to life in prison because they committed a crime when they were 13 years old. It was determined that their brains wasn't even fully developed to be able to understand the magnitude of the decision that they were making when they pulled that trigger. There's a law now that you can't sentence juveniles to life in that way like that anymore. And that was supported by the district attorney. And then my parents came home according to that district attorney supporting them for release. And those things were only able to happen because there was so much pressure from people fighting for change. If people don't fight for change, this government will do whatever they want to do. And if there's no opposition, they're going to do it. They'll get away with it. But if you fight them, if you force them, look, Meek Mill in Philly. They said Meek Mill, the judge, Janice Brinkley, she was also the judge that denied my parents an appeal when we filed back in the 90s. Meek Mill was arrested because he rearrested and put him in prison because he rode a dirt bike or something during the time he was on probation. And Janice Brinkley said, you're going to jail. She sent him to prison. And Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, got in the helicopter, flew to the prison Meek Mill was in and said, come on, and took it. And there was nothing they could do about it. There was so much pressure because people were complaining about the issue and the injustice. And Meek Mill is a really famous and popular person. There were so many people complaining about it that they just let him go. That power is from people putting pressure and signing those documents and protesting in the streets, and people have the power. And that's, once you exercise that power and ignite that flame, it's something that they can't put out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I can't really hear him.
Can you mind? You want a microphone?
Can you come closer, bro?
Or Daz will. Come on up.
But yeah, so you got the I was wondering how you took that thing, that insight on their own communities.
I still ain't really.
Arthur, can you repeat? I mean,
We talked about visiting prisons, and then I missed.
Yeah. So, how do you go about gaining their insights and on their own communities and how they've grown up?
Getting insights from who? The prisoners?
Yes.
Talking to them.
Yeah. So, how do you? So, I don't know. I would like to visit those prisons. And
Okay, so okay, I get you. All right. So one of the things that, and I appreciate your question. All right, so yeah, if you're not like on somebody's visiting list, or they don't have your number, then you can, I'm trying to come in. They ain't gonna let you in. You know, and it's crazy because like that's one of the things that probably never happen. I'll never say never though, but that's part of the that's the other part of this that people don't understand in terms of how inmates are treated. There's so much brutality happening, so much negligence happening, right? But again, you can't just pull up to the prison, right? Even if it's some authorizing in my job, I get a chance to go that they say, and they know you come in, they want to take everything is going well, right? So it's like that's why it is important to have people that are on the inside, residents of these places that are what's going on. The other, what do you do? And it really, you just, if somebody is inmate, they can be, they at a guards, at administration. So there's a lot to go into. There are organizations improving prisons and supporting people that are currently incarcerated. If you want to help to those organizations and figuring out what role you can play, but I think but if you have, and a lot I'm saying focus on no trouble yet, but people be having a lot. No letter ain't first. So before you can start there, moderate. Unfortunately, I had not only the father brothers in prison, but uncles and cousins. And as I grew up, my homies went to prison. So a lot of my perspective came from what I was doing just for my to in terms of how I and support others, but I think it really does start out on a personal level, particularly in that situation, because you just don't have access. It's a different world, and we don't have access to that world. For this, we gotta get people out of them joints, man. For me, that's the answer. We gotta get people out of them joints at the end of the day. Set up to support familial bonds. They're not set up to help people heal acquisition. They're not set up for further education. They're not. It's not. When people go to prison and spend decades in prison, they come home and it's still places they can't live. We have to understand. It is not a, grew up in that, you understand. Proud of him, right before he, it was like a reoccurring thing, this shit getting worse. You know what I'm saying? He's been in jail since 1989. He's like, Slug, this shit getting worse. You know what I mean? Everything was just they're reducing everything, raising the prices of what things cost for them to buy. It's just not a place in my again, another hope of mine. We have to share that with these young people, man. Like, fam, you don't want to do that. You don't want to go there, man. Once they get you, bro, it ain't gonna be this. You know, you ain't gonna be no Mike Africa Jr., bro. Ain't nobody coming, ain't gonna be no Tony Lewis Jr., ain't nobody coming to get you. I'm telling you, that's how it really is. And you know, I think we gotta really, really push that through. That once they get you, man, it's so hard for us to get you back. So, yeah, I hope I answered your question, bro.
Yeah, while you were talking about that, I was thinking if the prisoner calls home, there's a recording that comes on and it says you have a collect call from, and then the prisoner's name will come up. And then it'll say something like custom calling features are not allowed during this conversation. And at the end of it, it'll say preventing suicide is important. And if your family member has suicidal tendencies or whatever, please contact the prison immediately, this, that, and the other. But they don't give you any kind of way to contact the prison. They don't say, call this number. You ever see that? If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. You might expect that they would say that, call 1-800-PRISONS or something. There's nothing. Trying to find the number for that issue is so long, it's so hard. I've been trying to find that number for 2 years. I still haven't found it. There's so many numbers that I call, and they say, oh, you got the wrong number, you got to call this place or call that place. So to Tony's point about it is set up to be disruptive and it's set up to be hard. How is it that the prison system can arrest a person and take them 3,000 miles away from their child? Lompoc, California, my Uncle Chuck was in Lompoc. 3,000. My grandmother wanted to go see her son. First, she got to figure out where he is. Then she got to buy a plane ticket, a hotel ticket. There's so much. There's so many obstacles, and like it gets harder. When I first started going to prison to see my dad, children didn't have to be on the list, on the visiting list. First of all, there's a list, and if you're not on it, you're not getting in. Mm-hmm. But children didn't have to be on a visiting list back then. And they didn't have to carry ID with them. Then it got to the point where everybody had to be on the list. Then it got also children, including breastfeeding babies, had to have identification. And it just got worse. And we used to be able to take food in to feed them. Then you couldn't do that. They had to eat out of vending machines. Then they stopped the vending machines. It got so bad that before my father came home from prison, the water that you need to drink, that they had to drink, smelled like chlorine and goose shit. Jesus. And he had to buy water. The amount of money that he spent on water was more than he spent on food because the water was so bad, and it just got progressively worse. The EPA, we even had this whole thing where we fought. Dad was challenging the company, the prison. And the EPA came up to the prison and they started talking about how it's safe levels for drinking and all of this kind of stuff. For the prisoners, it was okay to feed them that water. But the EPA would also say things like, well, but I wouldn't drink it, or my wife wouldn't drink it. I wouldn't let my family drink it, but they let the prisoners drink it. So this whole thing is so messed up. Prisoners don't get treated with respect. And that is a whole issue in itself because we've been dehumanized, right? And so they treat us inhumanely. So there's a lot with this prison system, and unless you jump through the hoops, you will never understand or know or be able to see the people that are behind those walls.
And I just want to add something about, like, when you just said what you said, Mike, I was thinking about the suicide. So we had an uncle. My Uncle Gregory, he committed suicide in federal prison January 1st, 2012. And I remember my Uncle Alvin calling me, telling me this, right? And then me talking to my grandmother, and the way that the prison, like how they announced it, how they called, you know what I'm saying? And even reflecting on visiting him, and my grandmother, who was in her like late 70s, when this particular, we going to visit him, and she had 2 knee replacements. And they wouldn't let her in because the knee replacements was setting off the metal detector. Right? We drove, he was in Allenwood, Pennsylvania. We drive in the Whitegate, Pennsylvania. The prison was Allenwood. But you think about that. My elderly grandma, they said she can't come in because her knee, this is Asian. My cousin Dee Dee right here, her dad, one day, me and him, we go up there. We stop at McDonald's. He take his high blood pressure and his cancer medicine. They do this drug detector thing on your hands. He sets that up. We always do go to McDonald's. He take his medicine, right? His medication, right? No, but these are all the things. And guess what? He couldn't go in. You drive. They're not saying, "Oh, y'all came all the way from DC," and we my grandmother got knee replacements. It's no regard for that. It's not, this, you know what I'm saying? And these are the kind of things, or when people die on the outside. And I had to call the chaplain or whomever, and they get your person to call back, and you got to break the news that grandma died. Nephew got killed, or brother got killed, or sister died, whatever. You understand? People don't understand the dynamics of that. When you're predicting by themselves, you can't go and hug them. They can't come to the funerals. Like, this is for families, but nobody talks about the intricacies. Like, life continues to happen. People age, so they don't take any of that in consideration. That's why, like, our message to the youth and all that continues to be like, don't get taken. Don't get taken, man, because it's just not. It's not fit for anybody. Crazy.
And go ahead.
Okay, so my question is, how do we stop feeding the beast? Where's the preventative measure? How do we stop it? And I know I'm being naive when I'm asking that question. I'm being naive or being romantic or being, just hopeful.
Yeah.
But there must be a way that we can stop feeding that beast.
I think that's a really good question. And the answer is just as simple. Stop feeding it. Right? You stop feeding it. But we got to here is the harsh reality. The reason why people feed the beast is, one, they don't know they're feeding the beast. And two, they're to some degree because they use it. The system itself is set up for us to fail. But everybody supports the system because the system gives us things that we like to use. But we can, look, let's face it. If we said abolish prisons, do you know how many people in our community would say, nah, we need prisons? If we said abolish the police, do you know how many people would fight you and say, nah, we need the police, because who's going to protect us from these crazy people? There is so much work that needs to be done for us to be self-sufficient, so that it shouldn't be a thing where we have to abolish the police. It should be more of a thing where we've been able to take care of ourselves and protect our own community, that we just don't need the police. But we haven't gotten there because there are too many things fighting against us as we're trying to move forward. We got these television shows that these kids are watching that are programming them into thinking that they should shoot people. You got these video games that they're playing that people are buying for them for Christmas that makes them think it's okay for them to shoot people. You got these musicians that are getting on the radio talking about how they want to shoot and disrespect and all of this stuff. And people not only listen to it, they enjoy it. And so if we're talking about feeding the beast and how we stop doing that, the harsh reality is people have to be ready to actually stop doing that. And we haven't gotten to that point. That's why education is so important. True education. I'm not talking about reading, writing, and arithmetic. I'm talking about giving your children a level of security so that they feel the need to be good people. My daughter, we were in a car accident. Me and my daughter were driving down the street, and somebody made an illegal turn, and they turned right into us. And I called the insurance company, and I said, look, this is what happened. And I told my daughter, I said, look, the insurance company, they're going to ask you, are you hurt? And if you say yes, they're going to give you $10,000. Are you hurt? She said, no. I said, you owe me $10,000. You owe me some money. The fact that she would not lie, and I didn't tell her you should say anything, but she's secure in herself and what her home provides for her. I talked to my dad about it, and I told him what happened and how she would not do that. And he said, Mike, you don't know how good it makes me feel to hear that your daughter would not lie. Because that also means that within the family structure, she also would not lie. You know, and so like there's so many people that are able to be swayed into doing something wrong for the come up, instead of being right and being satisfied and feeling comfortable standing in that righteousness. So for us to stop feeding this beast, it is really just that simple. Stop feeding the beast. People know what it takes to be healthy. They just don't want to do it. They know what it takes to be able to run better. They just don't want to do it. They know what the solution is. And if they don't know, trial and error, if you try and you will figure it out, but they just will not do it. And until we get to the point where we're like, yeah, we ready to do this, it ain't gonna happen. Tony and I, if we hadn't fought for our parents to be home, it wouldn't have happened. And so we fed the machine of freedom. And so our family came home. And if we don't stop feeding this beast, it's going to continue to devour us just like it's doing.
Yeah. I just think we got to believe that we can. You know, sister, you have a beautiful voice, by the way. I really do feel like we have to believe that we can, and we got to believe that it can start with us. I think that's important. A lot of times we want to always say, well, let's look to the past or look to outside of ourselves for what needs to happen. It's definitely complex. I think in terms of one of the things I think about a lot of times is like, I ponder that question a lot. And so for me, it's like, dang, but like, is it all on us, right? It's like, we do. And we know in this thing called America, it's really not that way. I believe in, like, again, modeling small, like starting small. Maybe all of us, you know, won't. Maybe we can't do it for all of us. But I do believe we can start where we are and build out. And my life has shown me that you'll find your tribe. So we have to continue to, like, perfect small and just hope, even in the midst of everything that we see. We wouldn't, like, you know, I guess they call it faith, right? Make it happen. We can, and we will. We don't have a try. That 2 little girls over there. I'm saying I can't just accept that it ain't going to, you know, do it for them. And but you just shared about your princess. That means something, right? And that's what I'm saying. Family, and you know, it's possible.
And I saw that we had another question, but I had a comment about that as well. When you speak about feeding the beast and you say starting small, I think another important aspect is looking towards these corporations that we're buying into, that is funding these corporations. So we're talking McDonald's, Victoria's Secrets, the list goes on, things that we consume on a daily basis. I believe, like you were saying, if we could all come together, it would be a beautiful movement. We may not all be able to do it, but if you do it within your families, you'll see that ripple effect could be huge. So doing a research of seeing what corporations are buying into this carceral system that I am also supporting, on a daily basis, and making an effort in that way, I believe could also make an impact.
Yeah, for sure. Everybody say, okay, we know there's a lot of problems, but we're just going to deal with this one. This one company, we're going to target this one company. This one company supports prisons. And we're not going to buy one sandwich from you, Chick-fil-A or whoever you are, unless you stop. And make that a global movement.
Yeah.
Or they ain't gonna be selling no sandwiches. It's just that simple. Stop feeding them and they will stop, you know what I mean?
Sure enough.
Yeah. Ma'am in the green shirt, yes.
Thank you. And thank you both, Mike and Tony. My name is Brad Thomson. My question is, it's still from the same vein around feeding the beast, and maybe more for Tony, just as DC specific, although I know the dynamic exists in Philly too. But you began to speak to it earlier about what I would describe diplomatically as the tension in the community around violence prevention, right? Violence intervention, what is needed in this moment, right? Collectively, we want safer communities. There's difference of opinion about, right, what it takes to get there. Not only difference of opinion, but literal also different knowledge, right?
Sure.
Around kind of the comprehensive approaches that are needed. But can you just say more about what I would characterize as the forces that don't care about us, the forces that don't care about our communities, don't actually care about our children, our livelihoods, exploiting that tension in service of mass incarceration, right? Exploiting that tension and, right, folks who do really care getting caught up in that, right? And being used, dare I say, right, to further feed the beast, right?
Yeah.
While because they are genuinely and authentically committed to peacekeeping, right? But they're advocating for solutions that we fundamentally know that there's decades of evidence that don't actually create safer communities, but literally just fuel private prisons.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I first want to start off by saying, absolutely, we all deserve to be. America, with DC is a part of America, right? Sometimes we don't, I don't know. But we take safety standpoint, we take us versus them, right? So us being the good people, and the function of law enforcement is to keep us safe from them. But when we really look at who dies in this city, right? I just would love for us to say, how about we keep them safe? If we ever kept them safe, automatic, but them safe, level of investment, because when them aren't safe, right? Some of them prey on, quote unquote, us. People respond. So this response is lock them up, get them away, keep us safe. And so the people that are never unsafe, to your go. Now, all of the things that we wanted to do anyway, we can do. You can look up and down, this is the street right out here, it's 14th Street. You can look to your right and to your left. 20 blocks that way, 20 blocks that way. It used to look like it look now 10 years ago. You knew when push people, right? Close that project down, move them out, has put most gentrified place in America, right? And this latest wave of crime, right, is gonna further that. When you look at again, who's dying? Poor black people from here. Who's unemployed? Poor black people from here. Who ODing? Poor black people from here. Who's food insecure? Who's it's so about this city. There is a very finite, not all black people, but black people from Washington. If we ever were hyper focused on them thriving, we wouldn't have a problem. And it's doable. We got a 19 and a half billion, right? And we talk about programming, and we are pretty resource heavy. So if for the native black population, right, that I'm talking about, is amongst that or the how many of those people are returning citizens, that is incredibly high. But we still have major barriers around is can be seen as being anti-return citizen. But our DC government may be the number one. City government does an incredible, but the private sector here, the second outside of the federal government, right? The federal government, it's some work there, but the federal government is not a second chance employer. That's the number one in Georgetown University. Number 2 and number 3, they're not returning citizen friendly. We think of all the hotels, all the law firms, all the lobbying firms, all the IT companies, the healthcare, banking and finance, hospitality, and IT. All industries citizen friendly, but all of our people do their time in the federal bureau of prisons where we have no autonomy over what kind of training. So they're not even being prepared. It's deep. So we should be doing more on the resource side, because we, right? In our community, right? The populace that, for the most part, aren't from here, right? So again, we take a line of defense for what's happening to native poor black people. Just moved here, whether I'm black or not. I'm not that them ain't my friends. That's not my brother. That ain't my father, my cousin. That's not. And now in DC, that's no longer my coworker. So you got strangers walking past, so all the people that can be easily painted as a problem that needs to be removed. That's where we. People argue the contract, right? People argue the job. So I'm not non-sympathetic. Nobody should be victimized, but it's context. Right? You didn't get a grandparents a chance. What do we expect? And then we go around the adults and try to help the youth only. Like in the history of humanity, in the no evidence that that's ever happened. We try that time and time again in this city. So I feel inclusion. We have to foster a culture of redemption around those that have made mistakes. We have to hold the private sector hiring policies, right? Or asking the question, are your hiring policies current? Right? Do they make sense to Washington, D.C.? If we know the black people, the black population here that's born in D.C., we know we have a huge part of that demographic that have been just as involved. Should our employees just have these broad brush, no felony conviction type stuff? The other side of that, probably 85% of the people that have felony convictions in the District of Columbia have felonies that can be considered violent. So can you just automatically exclude, right? Way to work your way back. So if you did 30 years in prison, you've been home Like, we got to think about these things. But if it's not happening to the people that are making the decisions, right? And folks, again, don't show up to the ballot box. If people aren't participating at hearings at City Hall and things of that nature, this is what we've been trying to encourage folks to do, so their voices can be heard, so that pressure might speak, so we can stop being ignored. Because I feel, again, like I'm gonna say this, I want y'all to really share this in terms of, yes, we all want, like, again, I have a wife and children, I got an aunt, I got a mom, I got a dad, I got cousins, I got friends, I got people. The other night, it was a girl too, but I broken into. I'm saying, like, I had lost all friends to gun violence and all that, lost clients, 2 clients over the weekend. Like, it ain't like I'm immune. I can see I've been a victim time and time again, but I understand that, right, the behavior. And so, again, we want to hold the people that are doing these things accountable, but we don't want to hold ourselves or the system accountable. And we have to do that. You know what I mean? And only we would be even worthy to start using that word accountability. You know, we need to open up access points, and we got to really collectively want. Everybody, you know, we say that thing, everybody got the same opportunity. That's bullshit. It really is. Like, it's not true. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so it's like, at the end of the day, you know, not to ramble, but I just really think your question just is a deep one. And it's important that you don't stop seeing young people's humanity, and it's not an excuse for the behavior, but it's nuanced and it's complex, and we gotta, again, want for other people's families what we want for our own, because we all share space, man. This shit real. You know what I'm saying? And you can't lock it up. That we wouldn't even be having this discussion about that. That would have ended with my father and them. Because remember, they was the problem, right? Remember? So you don't live up forever. But we were supposed to be safe all of a sudden. You know what I'm saying? But like now we 34 years later and we talking about the same stuff. We gotta do something different. Yes, that's right.
Yes, ma'am.
And Tony said this first time. And you guys said a lot. And for me, you know, we grew up in the city. We grew up in a drug infested neighborhood. And so, you know, when the kids in the cars doing, you know, all these things, I rolled the lot so up. I did a lot of things that he doesn't know that I did with my cooking because it was fun. People aren't always doing things to harm people. It's just fun. You know what I mean? People selling drugs and stuff like that. The neighborhood came up and if you don't see something different, you don't know anything different. It's okay if you're trying to take care of their family. And people tend to look down on people for doing those kind of things. But it's not, for some people, it's the way of life. A lot of people parents are on drugs. They still on drugs from the 80s and whatever. And their kids have suffered. And so they steal my mom. Very I stole them so that we could eat, me and my sister. You know, one time I was refrigerator to go for a whole year. We had napkins in our pocket, all kinds of stuff. And so coming from that type of environment, I know what these kids are going through. I've been through it. I was actually therapy in my late 40s to deal with the stuff that I had to go through as a child because of the neglect my mom was just leaving me. She told me and my sister, but she told us that we were going to our next son. Never returned for 3 years. My grandma was friend ran into her 40 or more. That's how she quit a job, everything. And so, you know, sometimes it's a bigger picture.
Yeah.
What these kids are doing. They're not just doing it just to do it. You know what I mean? And there aren't any programs, but they can give you $100 ticket to feed down the street. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of revenue, like Tony said, coming to the city, but what do we do to pour into people who are in these impoverished areas? We live in Ward 7, and I've never seen the mayor come on our side. Ever. We don't have the same stuff you guys have on this side. The restaurants and those sort of things. They say people steal, but they still need to.
Yeah.
It's still all over. And not only that, when you talk about that issue, people have to give people a second chance because it's become a revolving door. Because when you don't, when you catch the money, you will go back to that old behavior because you have to survive. People are in survival mode. You know what I mean? And so, in many instances, that's what's really going on. They're just in survival mode. So it becomes a revolving door, which brings them back into the system, and what they really want, and that sort of thing. So, it's a whole lot with that. But my last point is, they don't want to hire people, but you got people within your own organization still. People get caught every day, looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars.
You better say it.
Private industry,
Yeah.
this district government, we have more people with district government than you check the shit. And so,
But they never stop hiring people that.
so you can't say that they have not been reformed.
That's right.
People that they can't be reformed. Because again, you got people like me, and working amongst me, who still, I had 2 coworkers who worked at Poison about 3 years ago. They were conspiring, taking money from the table, and they got busted. And those they found out, so you can't say that somebody who's out of prison can't be reformed because we got people working very much who are thieves.
There you go.
And with that, thank you all for coming. Thank you, and Tony, thank you for your comment. That was very necessary. Yes, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Mike. Please join me in giving a round of applause. Thank you to Miss Debbie and Mr. Mike, Mr. Tony. Thank you all. Please stay. I know you may enjoy this evening, but you chose to spend time with us, and that is something that we truly do not take for granted. This is a conversation that I'm glad everyone had the chance to partake in. If you are interested in the books that Mike and Tony mentioned, they are on sale over here. If you would like to say something to them, they will be in the space. I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you for joining us. Wait, and